Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, I wasn't sure whether I was supposed to dance in introduction or something because the music was going on, and I found it nice, so I didn't want to cut it. I'm Carsten. For those of you who may be interested how to remember that, most of you have more, but if you had only 10 cars in your private garage, and you imagine 10 cars, and you put that the other way around, you have cars 10, and you're correct both in spelling and pronunciation. So this is the 10 cars guy. And I'm with Gameforge. Who has heard about Gameforge in this room? Okay, I see rather few hands, so to all others, thank you very much for caring nonetheless. So I used the opportunity to spend half an hour telling about what our company does, so because most hands didn't go up. Now, in very short, it's a company, about 450 people, about 1 million users per all of our full-time employees, so that's a total of 450 million registered. We are coming clearly from the PC environment, having started a good decade ago, and have moved, of course, into the mobile space 3 years ago. We are turning revenue in euro of a good 100 million for several years now, and luckily have always been profitable. This is at least from an operational standpoint. We once ventured out into purchasing, acquiring a listed company, and this one person selling it to us will also be on a panel this afternoon, so he's of course very happy and rich now, and we needed to write off a few things, so that's what I refer to when I say we have been profitably always on a operational level, but we once needed to write off about 85 million euros. Anyway, so this is Gameforge, and I want to thank all of you for being here, thank the organizers for giving me the stage. I'm excited to be in Krakow. I do personally believe that Cracovia will make it into the playoffs, of course with Wisła together, and with the volleyball world championships, you're really showing that you're also the European capital of sports, as you have been officially a few years ago. And then the UN report, which puts this area into the #1 position for growing innovation. I think, when was that? 2010 or so, that UNCTAD, the UN conference on trade and development, said so. So congrats, and it's a big pleasure for me to be here. I want to put out a theory here today, which is maybe not completely surprising to some, but mostly contested, I would say. How is voice quality? Can you hear me well in the back or so? Yeah? Okay, good. I need to watch out what I say then. Okay. So, orcs eat birds, and why mobile shouldn't be casual. You all know this little thing here. Who of you would have thought that something like this could ever make money? So what do you think? Who would have thought that Flappy Bird would make money? Okay, there was no hand up, and I would not have thought so at all. Of course, it did make about $50,000 US, and that was only on advertising, so no real direct monetization implemented, like selling the app or in-app purchases, and 50 million downloads it was doing. So I would have doubted that it got so successful, and this is although I have had the pleasure to spend a good dozen of years in the games industry by now. I started an online games company in '99, trade sold it, and then continued doing things like that. Brought the first PC-based client game MMORPG to the marketplace in 2000 or the first one which made some money on a certain level to the European marketplace in 2002, and have been doing things like that ever since. Of course, starting on the consoles, Pong and Atari back then. So, even with that kind of, when we say background, the nowadays mobile market does appear at times a bit unpredictable to me, I must say. I feel that it has become a bit of a lottery, especially if you're looking at the casual space. And I want to explore in this talk about how one can still make money. Tons of new customers, of course, are flocking to the marketplace. Let me see whether we have that on the slide. Yeah, of course. Bit hard to read, but you all know that. So we're having now 2.2 million phones, mobile phones, installed in the world of our population of 7.2 and ticking up. And of them, 50% are about to use it mobile for internet. So that makes it 31% of the entire population. So that's quite a lot. And we can thus easily reach, possibly and theoretically, 2 billion smartphone users. Granted, you face some back and forth with Apple. That's quite a lot, but also it's also not so difficult. You just need an idea and to create something with a bit of development skills, and you could be up there in the store. And if you're then a game, as I think holds true for many of us here, it's even better, because the games are obviously the quality which make especially well money theoretically in the stores. So it's the top category by revenue on iOS, as one sees here from App Annie, or let me see, and it's reaching 75% of the revenue on the iOS App Store, and even 90% on Google Play. So the App Annie thing shows that games lead both in downloads and in number of revenue on both app stores. China actually being the biggest growth driver on iOS, and US still being #1, but China growing very big, and on the Google Play, it's still the US driving most of the growth. Even the growth outside of games, of course, has been good, and helping Google to narrow down the revenue gap with the iOS. So thus it shouldn't actually be a biggie to establish a profitable mobile game studio, right? So others have even succeeded themselves. So we know them all: Rovio, King, Supercell, fantastic growth developments, especially. Let me see whether I can do this here. Oh, wow. So this has been doing 10 times with Candy Crush Saga really going through the roof. The IPO 6 weeks ago, Tuesday, I think. So good 6 weeks ago, they made the IPO being now worth, when IPOing, more than 5 billion euros market value, having been going down a little bit, 17% lost the shares. So now it's even still an amazing 4.25 billion euro market cap for the King guys. So maybe even more fantastic, Supercell, when data leaked for Candy Crush alone, for Clash of Clans alone in January, or when it was, we all could learn that they're doing on their first game alone more than $5 million per day, 5.15 million. So it can well be expected that this growth is continuing onwards. So these guys have clearly made it, and being it fantastic skills or an element of luck, which cannot be underestimated, probably a combination of both. We will see whether this can be the recipe for anyone to succeed. I mean, these guys here with Boom Beach now having 3 games out. Of course, that's amazing and a bit a counter-argument to my central theory that with games on mobile, it may be a lottery. But you must look a bit deeper, and I do think it's mostly a lottery in a very casual space. And we can argue about Supercell's games, but I wouldn't necessarily think they're really casual, like a Flappy Bird or an Angry Birds of Rovio. So let's have a look a bit deeper at Rovio. Many of you may know how Angry Birds and Rovio have started. It was actually 3 guys starting up a company, making 51 games, almost going broke, and then deciding, okay, let's do just one more thing, and sketching 10 ideas a day for such a game before one day the Angry Birds came along. So what's to learn from that? Well, simple, you maybe need to do a lot of shots and really take a lot of trials with your casual game concept before you can be successful. And in my opinion, that is very costly. And only few newly established mobile games companies really have the backing of financial nature to run through all of this thing. And to my personal understanding, it's even the so-called superheroes here of Supercell that they did about 40 games really before the first hit in the company came out. That's a bit contested feat because they have these 3 super games out there, but I personally believe you can't bank on getting the hit right. It's just a lottery. So, what do you do when you have one hit out, like Rovio did? Of course, you proliferate into other things. They will be, in 2 years, they were having a feature film out there in cinemas with the characters. It's being distributed by Sony Pictures. It's being animated by Sony, so it's big Hollywood style. Finland, I can't pronounce that, theme park is having an Angry Birds land for 2 years now, where families and kids can play together and enjoy it and get an increase to their app. And that's, of course, a way, once you had a hit, to live from it. So they have been having one. Even they don't venture out into a lot of new games. It didn't go so well when they have been with the Angry Birds brand. Maybe it's still coming, but they have been creating a racing game, Angry Birds Go, and it didn't fare so well. And even these guys are not dishing out a lot of new things, but rather concentrating on what they once had here as a deservedly lucky shot. So, what can we do? So, we need to have money to create a lot of games to maybe be lucky. Once we are, we can proliferate that. Once we are not, how do we start? Well, we could simply go and try to profit from someone else's big brand. The Candy Crush saga, you may remember, has of course been hugely copycatted. And that's with a reason, because if we look at Candy Crush Saga, that's here, 77 countries that the game has the highest rank Candy Crush Saga. And if we look here, it's the highest grossing game even in 137 stores, 137 countries. That's hugely amazing. And that's why it was copycatted like crazy from everybody, all these candies and stuff. So as a result, what did they do? They filed the candy for trade protection and went with Apple to get people using candy overly explicitly out of the shop, not getting them in. You may remember Candy Slots Casino was having a very, very long name, but the app icon was simply called Candy Slots, and they were rightly, I would say, convincing Google that Apple that it doesn't make sense that this app should also use a candy very apparently and visibly in the app name. So, as of today, so what do I want to say? These copycats, of course, are, however, completely muddying the water. How can they be visible if there are so many of them using that same thing? So I very much doubt that it is a good strategy. They swim around like fish, and then there's the next thing, and there are hundreds or several hundred of these apps of the same quality coming out. I'm not sure how one can really, other than in the nature where swimming with fish can protect you against others, but you will never stick out, and the user will not really find you in the mobile web. But the good news is, after all, users are not stupid. They will soon learn to distinguish the crappy bird, I would say, from a quality game. Nonetheless, you will need to get users in, and you want to be listed among the top games to get in more users. So you could want a feature on the stores. That can work out well. I know that Distimo is here today. They have done an analysis here on the usefulness of being featured. And one can see that some categories work perfectly well. The left one here says that you have been having download-wise 6 times the amount of normal quantity of downloads you had when you were featured here. And here it does say that it did increase at least by 400%, so times 5. If you're in one of these categories featured, you will have times 5 revenue, times 6 download numbers. That's super. But there are even other categories, like indie categories, called Essentials 10 Incredible Indie Games. They didn't show any real impact on the number of downloads or revenues achieved. Or Indie Game Showcase also, according to the Distimo research, didn't really help the guys a lot. However, there's a few things that one can note from these things. Not only new games are being listed, but sometimes even in a category called best new apps or best new games, there are things released which are a year old or so, or several years even. And so it does work, but only for some. Of course, it is free being featured. It does cost some efforts for your business development people and for you as a management to sit on the lap of our big Apple and Googles. But of course, one can try, but it's just a very few that actually really get chosen. So luckily, I would say it's not necessarily the crappy copycats that get chosen, but that's a real reason to go for some uniqueness and quality on your own. So, users, if you don't get featured, they may be not coming to you automatically. You may want to go to organizations which help you acquire users. So that, of course, has a big cost component. And the question is how much you spend and how much actually these users really then give you as a return when you spend with them. So you need to trade off the cost for collecting them and the revenue which they spend in your money, in your game. And here comes the unfortunate truth, which people bringing out mobile games in marketing have probably all experienced. I would imagine in this country as well. The cost of recruiting users, let's here in iOS US case, worked out by Superdata, cost per install indexed here to 100 in January 2013, is growing up. And it has been growing up. And this is whilst the average revenue per user indexed here basically is a flat line. So everybody knows it's this big rule you need to follow, or eventually you will die. If your users do not spend at least as much as it costs you to get these users, you will be out of business. So it is the average revenue per user. In the mobile world, the average revenue per download must be at least equal to your cost per install in the marketing. So this research by Superdata had that on average, the conversion rate is below 5%. So, and the guys who pay, on average, pay in the US per month a good $20. That's nice. But if you say only a 20th part, 5%, pay on average a $20, obviously you make about, on the big average over all users that you have been recruited in marketing, $1. But as a matter of fact, the costs are now on average, according to this iOS US study, $2.25. So you need an average playtime of every single user spending $1 per month of 2.25 of a month. How on earth can a casual mobile game really expect to keep users within their game of an average lifespan of 2.25 of a month? I believe you really are seeing here that it is very hard for a casual game to achieve that. And this is, by the way, also very true for numbers that we see in our own data. So I would clearly agree. Another example, I happen to know founders and guys of a company. They have now a valuation, so you can be lucky. They have a valuation of several hundred million euros now, a startup company. But the best day or a month they have ever seen was the month in which a super thing they have been earning the revenue which they spent in marketing. So everything else they ever do, develop the game and all other costs, needs to be financed by their investors. And if we look at this example again, so, or where we have it, I maybe have another slide. So we will, here, yeah, let's have a look here. Sorry, I can't be read, but what it should say is an average revenue per download here versus the average cost per install. That's again, Apple App Store in various countries. In Europe, we have an average UK here of the revenue per download, $2.30, Italy $1.60, Germany $1.45, on big average about $2. And this one here, the green one, is the average cost per install. So this is clearly below. The average here is, where do I have it? $2.13. So in order to make $1.80 is the real average here, you need to spend $2.13. However, there are better stories. Here, if you look to Japan, you can make a lot of money, the red one, average revenue, by just this one. So in theory, that's very good here, but the reality in Europe is very difficult. And US and Canada is a similar picture. So the most important thing, this study has been conducted for the top 250 games only. And when looking at other data, my personal belief is that, so this one is very bad. This is Superdata, and this one is Distimo. Superdata believes you need to spend more than you have. And here there are indeed possibilities to earn more than you spend, but that's a small margin. So in Europe, the case was you have 20% more revenue potential than you spend on the marketing, and who can really live off with a company where 80% go into the marketing? I believe that this may be difficult. And if you're not in the top 250, which have been analyzed here, it will probably be even harder. My guess would be that the cost per installs are higher than the average revenues then. So as a summary, in order to find more users, you could go as a copycat, which will make you not easy to find. You will try to get a feature with very few people only get. Or you need to go to the advertising guys and feed them a lot of money, which in the statistics may actually lose you most of that money. So how could you lower the entry barrier to a minimum by offering them free of charge? And the free apps with the model of in-app purchases are very much on the rise, according to Distimo here again. And they are now contributing to 80% of US revenue. Apps which are offered with in-app purchases, their revenue relative to apps which are being sold at a price, it's 80% now coming of total revenue from the in-app purchases of the free-to-play games. If you look again, if you think this is going to end, I personally don't think so. Again, in Japan and China, that's about 95% of all revenue being made with games in stores is via in-app purchases of free-to-play games. That gives me the opportunity to tell you a little bit about how we do that at Gameforge. So we have been publishing this number, 25 games in 50 languages for 75 different countries. Initially web, then client, now mobile games. And this has been working out quite well for us. Actually, the great organizers of this company, of this conference, made me hand in the slides too early. This is old data, but unfortunately it may be difficult to read anyhow. It's an Alexa ranking. Alexa of Google, many of you may know, is measuring how big a website is relative to all other websites in a country or in the world. And Gameforge has a ranking compared with all other websites in Germany. Here is it 100, but actually today it's a 63. In France, a 66. Turkey, 52. In this country, Poland, we are the 40th biggest website according to Google of them all. Number 40, I think that's quite a lot. There are a lot of porn sites which are below 40 in that ranking. I mean, I wouldn't know, but friends of friends may know what I'm talking about. So, even in Brazil, we're 125. And this is only because we have been offering our games in a very accessible format, free to play, which is, of course, very easy to try out, cheaper to market for new users because they don't have an entry barrier. And as you may all know, it's not only great for a user to try it out for free, but it's also a dominant model for the industry, for ourselves offering that, because there are these people which really give you a lot of money. And I personally feel very strongly that this is also a very, very valid point to go forward within the mobile industry, as I'm going to show you now. So the mobile market, no, let's do a little question here. So, who of you has ever played a free-to-play game on whichever platform? Okay, basically everybody. Who of you have played it on a mobile device? That's nearly everybody as well. Who of you has ever paid for a free-to-play game on a mobile device? See?
either way, whatever you would have done, I would have said, see, this was quite a lot of hands up. If you go to a B2B conference of specialists and core gamers, you get a lot of hands up. If you go on the street and go to whatever format, they will say they have played it, if they understand what it is really, and they will have not paid for it. And this is what I really think is fundamental here. So this mobile market analytics company called Swerve has done the following. They have been looking who is paying which amount of revenue. The percentage of total revenue is coming from 10 different, or how could I better say? So the finding is the top 10% of payers by revenue contribute a 50% of total revenue per month. That's here. 50% of a total revenue is coming from just 10% of users. The next spending 10% of numbers of users are contributing still 16%, and so on. So we have up till here with 30% of people paying for apps, and only those paying are being meant here. We have 50 plus 16, 66, 80% nearly of all the revenue. 80% of the revenue is coming from 30% of those users who ever spent. These 70% of all users here are contributing only altogether 20%. This is extremely narrow. You're really talking about people which are not willing to pay if you address casual gamers. If you address core gamers, that's my central thesis here, you have people which are more likely to spend. And of all these people here, only, only 30% give you half the revenue and 10% give it all. It's a very fine area of target audience that you need to cater for. So the basis before of these people all paying was that Swerve has been finding of all players about 1.5% pay. So 1.5% only pay, and then a third, this makes 0.5%, bring you half the revenue. Now, you really should be thinking to yourself, what can I offer not to 100% of my players? What can I offer to those paying, to 1.5% of the players? No, what you really should be asking yourself is, what am I offering to this 0.5% of my players that are actually contributing to half of my revenue? What do you want to offer them? Where do you recruit them? And how do you retain them in your game? And if you are approaching the market with a very general offering like a casual game, my theory is these are very, very hard to answer questions. You are very likely to become an everyman's person who just offers something which cannot be discerned. And I believe that you better really fine-tune a specific argument. So, it's clear from the data that here, when you look at this once again, you can unfortunately not read it here, but will slides be distributed at the show? So on the website, Bartosz is saying the presentations will be available. Then it's easier to see here that there's more information, that these guys here, they spend about 6 times more often, but even more important, they pay, when they spend, 12 times the amount of average money that these people pay. So they pay more often, but even more so, they pay higher amounts. So, mobile depends completely on the whales, depends completely on the big spenders. That's something we have been seeing in the PC world with our free-to-play business over more than a decade now. Or yes, we have been kind of very early with adopting free-to-play, 2004, 2005, yeah, that's a decade. So, what do we learn? The mobile business can require a very long breath because you maybe need to do 50 different games. This is to maximize your audience, you do maybe select a casual game because in theory you have these 2 billion people to reach out for. But in effect, and also the average development cost of a casual game is low. And you can be very successful, as we have seen with Flappy Bird. The guy finally took the Flappy Bird app, of course, offline because it was too much, he claims. Maybe it was simply Nintendo complaining that it's too much Mario Bros. Style, what he had there. I think all of us, we do not really know in detail. But what's important is that you should maybe do not do these experiments with the small games altogether. At least ourselves, we really don't want to. And no more, I must say. We have also founded a Gameforge mobile company 2.5 years ago, which has done also casual apps and which has lost more money than it made revenue. So there was revenue coming in, especially on the mid-core side, where we extended our existing brands into the game, but where we came up with something new on casual, it was a disaster. So we didn't know before, but we do know now. And we have learned that we should really define our target audience to where we have been. And this is a game called O-Game, going very strong in this country as well. We have done on the web initially, now also for mobile. It's a 4X strategy, sci-fi environment. That's really something that I would call a hardcore game. And in our Rovio-like, squeezing out what we have, of course, we have ported it to mobile. Now, the future for us is also something that I would consider quite a hardcore environment. And let's have a look at this.
Ambushed and outnumbered. You think I'd be willing to say hello to my little friend, Husen?
This is quite a deep game. It is the first synchronous mobile on the tablet, I know of at least. Combines RPG in there, and we believe that it has a good potential for people to pay often, pay high amounts, and stay longer than 2 months in there. It is, of course, risky. We paid a very significant amount of several million euros to develop it, and now also we need to market it as if it was, so to speak, not only a small tablet game. So it has another way of risk, but we believe that it's going to an audience which is willing to spend at a higher percentage as if we did the other casual games. And on the marketing also, we do know where to find these guys. We have been showcasing it at GDC, we have been showcasing it at PAX East last month. We will showcase it in other areas. We do press tours, flying journos around. All of that is really expensive. And you may not have the funds from start to do that, but instead of, so to speak, guessing that you will be lucky in something earlier than trying out 50 casual games, I'm not so sure whether it's actually much more riskier. So all of this boils down to, so to speak, the essence of this theory of mine. And now fasten your seatbelts, buckle up, ladies and gentlemen. It's a bit counterintuitive, but that's what I want to say here, so watch out. The secret sauce of mobile games. Well, this is, well, before, I'm a bit short on time, so community is important. We have been, you cannot really see here, more towards hardcore than casual. Other things that one could be said about that. Now, the secret sauce is, it's very obvious that the average revenue per download is higher with hardcore games than with casual games. But what I do think is that if you target your marketing to gamers, which are reading magazines, you can talk to press, and I'm happy to talk to press as it is here today for our Sigils tablet game. You know where to find these real gamers, and they are reading these press articles, and they are attending trade shows. And in this light, you have a targeted audience which you can grab without wasting your money all over the marketplace. So as a matter of fact, my theory is that the cost per install actually goes down if you are the Orc and not the Flappy Bird, so that you have lower costs and higher revenues, because the food chain clearly says that Orcs do eat birds. Thank you very much for your attention. I do, of course, remain available now for questions or later on at the show, however we are in time. Thank you.
I think we can let ourselves to one short question. Please keep it brief. I'm looking for hands in the air. Yep.
What title brings you the highest revenue right now on mobile for your company?
Icarium and O-Game, established brands in the core audience. We have launched all sorts of casual games, all of which have been a disaster. Maybe we are too stupid, that's well possible, but we have hired 50 people for our Gameforge mobile company. That's more than maybe a small startup can afford, and they're developing games, they're publishing, they're reading the surveys and stuff. We have not been able to influence the luck with some new, all sorts of different genres, casual titles.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
As you've said, your main audience is core gamers, and I wanted to ask, how aggressive are you in your cross-selling between games? Because you can have even longer period of time of lifetime among users if you cross-sell. So how aggressive you do it, and what are the main tools you use to do it?
We are traditionally very bad in that. We have not been cross-marketing a lot, and who has been following very attentively an Alexa ranking, you may have seen that we had a much worse one. This was for many, many years. We were running all our games standalone, and were cross-marketing by newsletter, or in web games by net bars, where we say you can also play something else in a not very elaborate fashion, I would say. Now we are at least bringing everybody to the Gameforge portal, with the result of having this peak here. This is when it was all different sites. This is when we introduced gameforge.com. We still think that cross-emailing is pretty much something which has a cost, as if you would spend money, and you better have a good analysis on your data before you send out emails to your loyal customers, paying or non-paying in existing games. So I do think that it's useful to cross-market, but you need to be very aware of the potential costs as well.